Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about recipes. So if you are super anxious and just want to see the code, here it is. So I'll give you a second to view that, and otherwise we're going to actually go through and talk about what all this does. So I'm actually going to delete all of that. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about the game registry. So this is exactly what it sounds. The game registry is telling the game to register a particular something to it. In our case, there's two types of recipes. There's shaped recipes and there's shapeless recipes. If you add a recipe, as you can see these commands right here, it's the same as a shaped. It can be, I would not recommend using them just because we want to be explicit with our code, and we're going to say we're going to start out with an add shaped recipe. So they're shaped and shapeless, and they do pretty much exactly what you would expect. One has defined areas that the recipe has to be in, the other does not. It just has defined inputs. So in the shaped recipe case, you're going to see that there's two parameters already populated for us, output and so we have output and params. So the first thing, the output, is exactly what you would think. It is the thing you're going to get from the recipe once it's crafted. So in our case, let's do a golden sword. So we're going to call this thing called ItemStack. And ItemStack is basically on your inventory bar or in any inventory slot, all your items are stored in a stack. And that allows for, it's resource efficient, because it's a lot easier, basically, a lot more efficient to just say load all the data and then assign a number to it, as opposed to multiple, like a quantity number, as opposed to calling all that data multiple times. So an item stack is exactly what you would think. It loads all the data and then also just basically adds a quantity number to it. So item stack, you can think of a little inventory slot. So we're going to do item stack, and we're going to do a golden sword. So this is in the items class, and we're going to pull items golden underscore sword, and we won't do anything else from there for now. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to assign the recipe, and there's going to be multiple variations of this, so I'm going to start with a very simple one. XY, and I'll explain this in a minute. X new. Actually, I'll do this now. So XY, what this is the recipe. So X and Y are basically our items. So in the recipe, we're going to have, in the crafting table, X item has to be next to Y item. So the first thing we're going to do is define what that means. So in our case, we're going to do new item stack blocks.dirt. Okay, and so what we're effectively saying there is that take the instances of X and require that they be blocks of dirt, and take instances of Y and make them instances of, let's say, gravel. Okay, perfect. So what this is saying is that when we run the game, I'm going to have to do a little bit of setup here because we haven't made a world or anything. It'll be easier to show you rather than just speak it out. I'll try to get that there so you can see that the recipe is there. So this will take a second. We're spawning the world down here, and okay. Let's see if we can get a little bit more open space over here. Whatever this will have to do. Okay, so the crafting table, what we'll take in quick command, hover over, press 1 for slot 1. Then we're going to want to do the same with dirt. Quick command, press 2, and then gravel. And again, quick command, press 3, and we're going to get full stacks by doing that. So when we place our crafting table down, go into the recipe, we can place a dirt adjacent to gravel, and that's effectively what that's saying. So right there we're saying the output golden sword is crafted by XY, so X as block of dirt and Y as gravel placed next to each other. So this is basically as shapeless as a recipe defined by shaped recipe can get. So you'll notice if we do something like this, that's fine as well, that's fine. Anytime that a block of dirt is horizontally adjacent to a block of gravel in either fashion, we'll get this sword. Now notice, if we go on top, that nothing will happen because our setup right here is for horizontal alignment, and that will make sense a bit more now as I modify this. So we can get a bit more explicit with our recipe here. If we type a space, so think about these as corresponding spots in the crafting table. So that's spot row, column 1, column 2, column 3, all in the same row. So now, as you saw, we could go all over the place. We could go from the right to the left, we could go from the left to the right, and there wasn't any issues. Now that we've added that little space there, we're actually telling it that there's now 3 parts to this recipe. Before there were 2. Before it only required dirt and gravel. Now we're telling it that it requires dirt, gravel, and an empty inventory slot. So you'll notice there that, that they're not adjacent. They have to be in that fashion of dirt, gravel, and space. Now we can still do this because we still meet that requirement, dirt, gravel, space, but there still has to be that space. We're actually telling it explicitly that a space is part of the recipe. So notice though that we still have this capability, that we're still row capable because all we've done is specify the recipe for a given row. It does not have to be the top one. So we can further specify this by adding, you guessed it, more rows. So since spaces are part of the recipe, we're just adding spaces. So now in something like this, we've added 2 rows to it. So now this recipe is effectively saying that 6 crafting table, where'd this go? 6 crafting table spaces have to be occupied in order for this recipe to work. That's 2 that are blocks and 4 that are not used. So we should be able to see it there, and we should also be able to say it there. But notice not there, because this is only allowing 3 of our 6 necessary. So technically the recipe is actually being read as these 6 blocks, and it's also being read here as these 6 blocks. This white space right here is actually part of the recipe. So we can continue that on in the predictable fashion of 1, 2, 3, and go. We'll save that, go for the run, and now what this is saying is let's explicitly make this require all of the spots be utilized in the crafting table. So now if we put that there and put that there, we'll get the sword, but now we won't get it here and we won't get it here, but we will still get it here because it meets the requirement of 2 full rows of empty space and block, gravel, dirt. Okay, perfect. So the first thing we're going to do is make this code a little bit easier, because as you would guess, as you're making multiple recipes, this is actually not very efficient to do. So we're actually going to copy that, Control C there, and I'm going to call this dirt stack. And for now I'm just going to place that there. We're going to get errors all up in that because that's not correct, but I'm going to do the same thing here, and I'm going to call this gravel stack. And I'm going to paste that here, and we'll do that. Now we're going to actually create variables out of this, so we're going to cast them as ItemStack, and we'll call this one dirt stack to correspond to the variable down here that we're wanting to create, equals that, and then we're good. And we'll do the same thing here. We'll cast gravel stack into that down there. Now, what this is all doing, if you should be familiar with how variables work, all you're doing is creating the variables here so that you can reuse this. This is just a micro optimization, because if it had to call this new object every time, that's extra resources that it shouldn't have to do, because there's no reason that we don't want that to be the same block every time. Okay, so let's keep that one for there, and let's add a different recipe. So we'll go again with the shaped recipe, new item stack, and we'll this time let's do items dot let's say wooden sword. Actually, I'll explain two things here. Let's do wool, and we'll do this parameter, and we'll do this parameter, and we're going to take the same thing here, except that y is going to be dirt stack and x is going to be gravel. So if we basically switch the recipe around, actually this is a block, that's why that's not loading properly. Wool is a block. Okay, so if we run this, we should get, if we flip our recipe around, we've said if it goes the one way, make a sword. If it goes the other way, make a block of wool. And there you have it. Block of wool, if we switch the spots, golden sword. Okay, so now the obvious question is, what the heck do these numbers mean? Okay, well what this is quantity. So 12, for example. This means that if we put if we make this recipe, we're going to get 12 blocks of wool. Okay, this one is damage slash metadata, and just as it happens, metadata damage is the thing for swords. So really you can just think about this as metadata. So what this is telling you is, let me pull this up here, is the metadata 0 for the blocks wool, which corresponds here. Metadata 1 is orange wool, 2 magenta, 3 light blue, 0 is white. So what we're explicitly telling this right here is white wool. Suppose we wanted to do pink wool instead, that's metadata 6. So we would just change this to 6, and then that would be the end of it. We would be getting pink wool instead of white wool in this recipe. Okay, so in the same sort of fashion, like I said before, and that's 12, we would get 12 pink wool. Okay, so items dot wooden sword. Let's go back to this one that we were going to do in the beginning. And there's just a relevant factor before we actually even load anything. This 6 right here is now damage durability loss from its maximum. So we can pull up the wiki here and find that wooden swords have a durability of 60. So what 6 right there is going to mean is create a wooden sword with 54 out of 60 durability. Now that's relevant because if we were to copy the same thing here and change this to golden sword, and let's actually change this to 30, and for this one let's do YY instead. You can actually get multiple, actually I'll just show you. I'll show you with a different block for now. So I'm just going to go back to 1, but that is the quantity. When you do it this way, the swords will stack. If you try to place them around in your inventory, the game will correct it, and we'll make a more obvious example of that later with blocks. But, okay. So, what we've said is our recipe was this, wooden sword. Okay, so we have 2 recipes here. We have XY, so if we have gravel stack in X next to dirt in Y, we'll get a wooden sword, and notice that the durability is about 50%. Now, if I add, what I say here, Y's are cast as dirt stack in my golden sword recipe, I can take this one out, get 2 dirt. Now notice how much lower the durability is, right? That's because 30 on a golden sword is a much higher percentage of its total durability versus on the wooden sword of 60. So in the 30 case for wood, we're getting a half durability sword. in the case for gold, we're getting a sword that's basically almost broken. It will have 3 effects. Sorry about that, the video stopped. So yeah, you're getting a half durability wood sword and a almost broken gold sword because you're taking 30 out of its 33 durability away. So that you can use that to basically craft and manipulate durability and things like that. So if you wanted to give somebody, for example, a basically broken gold sword, this would be the way to do it. Now, just as before, we could do something like this. We'll copy that and we'll call this golden sword broken. And we'll cast this as an item stack. Golden sword broken equals that. And this object, or this variable here, is now the object golden sword of quantity 1 with 30, or well, I guess with 3 out of 33 durability on the sword. So that's basically a useless sword is really what we're getting at. Okay, so let's clean this up a bit. Let's get rid of that. Basically getting a bit excessive. So if we wanted to change this here, for example, we'll space out this, so this is a nothing recipe. If we wanted to add or change it down such that the wooden sword was made by in the middle row, and let's change these back to our original casting. So now what we have is, in this case, we have one recipe that takes dirt and gravel in the top 2 slots, create a golden sword. If you put them in the middle 2 right slots, that corresponds to number pad 5 and 6 on the keyboard. You'll get 1 golden sword with half durability because a wooden sword's durability is 60. Okay, so now the final thing that we're going to talk about is the shapeless recipe. And as you might expect, it requires basically just the items. It just has inputs. So we're going to do ItemStack, and let's do a diamond sword. Okay, and let's give 5 of them. And since diamond swords have a really high durability, let's take off 400 of it, and we'll do dirt stack, gravel stack. Oops, stack. Do we need parentheses? I feel like I'm missing one somewhere. Got excessive parentheses here. Okay. So for simplicity's sake, let's comment these out so we're not getting confused. And when we load this, what this is going to do is allow us to put the dirt and gravel anywhere. So you'll notice before we needed to have the recipe like this to get our sword, our golden sword, but now if we do something like this, or like this, or like this, or this, this does not matter. As long as there is a gravel block and a dirt block both together somewhere in this, it will work. And here's a good example. When I place these down, each sword, so the durability is actually affecting everyone. Obviously I can't restack anymore. So we'll see a more obvious example like that in a minute. But we'll do 2 recipes here. So we'll do another dirt stack. We're going to modify that. And then we're going to go back to this. We're going to add sand here real quick. And we'll change that to sand. And then we'll do X in this case is the only thing in here. So what this is going to do is we're going to get a actually we're going to get different blocks. We're going to get dirt out of this, and we're going to get 256 dirt blocks out of 2 sand. So what this is saying is we just have the 1 now in the recipe, but it requires 2 of it. And this one is it requires 2 instances of a dirt and 1 instance of a gravel to get us 5 diamond swords. And we're actually just going to change that back to 1. so we don't have to worry about the stacking issues. So now you'll see when we load this up, move this down so you can see the recipes. We're going to need some sand. We'll quick command that to 2. If we put 2 up in these appropriate slots up here, we're going to get 256 dirt. And notice when I try to put it down, the game is actually correcting the stacking issue. So I can't actually take it out. I could do this if I do the shift command. It's going to place it appropriately, but notice it did try to spit it out there. But now if I try to move it anywhere, it's again going to try to correct itself into the proper stacking. And then in this one down here, for the diamond sword, what this means is not what I'm doing right now. This is not 2 instances of dirt. This is 2 instances of dirt. This is 2 dirt in 1 instance. What we need is 2 anywhere. So if you want to have a shapeless such as this, where you actually require 2 separate pieces of dirt, you call it once here and once there. And that's how you finalize that. That's about it. This should give you a pretty good idea about how to use this. Obviously, if you're using a lot of things like that, the one major thing to keep in mind is when you are putting recipes in, the durability and the smelting and things, this is actually going to be defined into the recipe. So if I were to do something like this, actually I need to copy this real quick and change that to a, so for example, and instead of gravel stack, let's do something like this, where we have wood, I actually don't want to get into that, the wood there, so wool. So first we're going to take dirt, stack. Okay. So what we're doing here is taking a dirt stack and a gravel stack to get a broken sword, and then we're going to take that broken sword and a piece of black wool to fix, effectively fix the sword. And let's actually, I don't know why I did wool. Let's do, I think it's oak. Plank. Planks. And oak is 0. So let me make sure I did that, everything right there. So we have wood stack here. So now, once this loads up, we'll take this, and the first thing that we'll do is move this down so you can see the recipe a bit more. So we're going to do this first one here. So that's dirt stack. Next to gravel stack, and that's actually in the middle slot. Middle slot to the right. So we get a wooden sword, and then in the same spot, the wooden sword that's all broken. We actually need the plank real quick. So let's get the plank, and then if we put the wood slot there, put that there, we get a repaired wooden sword because that was our recipe. That's actually working specifically on that durability. So notice, if I put a fully durable sword with the wood, the recipe does not work. That's because this recipe explicitly requires a 30 durability wooden sword. So just something to keep in mind. It can be a nuance. It can also be used for something like we just showed as sort of a AirStats repairing agent.